Well, hey, thanks for joining me for this video today. You know, I've been wanting to be out in the yard for the last couple days, but it's been absolutely miserable here, and pretty much just what you're seeing outside today is what we've had for the last couple days, except that it's been misty, rainy, just foggy for about 5 days straight now. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, it puts a big damper on my motivation level and on my mood of things, just because I want to be out in the yard doing things, but I can't do anything when I'm sitting inside. So unfortunately, it feels like winter is coming a lot sooner than I would like it to be. And that's also kind of a big bummer for me because, you know, every year it feels like it gets harder and harder to get to the winter season and then just try to make it through those months. It's like taking the thing that you love doing the most and then just saying, hey, you can't do it at all for the next couple months. Don't even try to think about it, can't do any of it. So every year it seems to be getting harder and harder for me, and especially after this year that I've been working so hard in the yard, so many projects going on and things, that it's just gonna be really difficult to get to this winter season and try to forget about all that and try to not do anything lawn care related. So I just don't know really how to fix that. There is no fix for it. So growing up in Minnesota, I would say that most people don't like winter, but it's kind of inevitable there that you're gonna have to find a way to survive it or adapt to it. And so that's what we did. Especially when I was a kid, I enjoyed the winter time. We just kind of embraced it as in another season that you just get bundled up and you go outside and you do things. But it's not really the case anymore as much when you get to be an adult, I don't think. And especially here, it's not really consistently winter, or what I would call consistent winter. It's kind of like an up and down thing. In the last 3-4 years, we haven't really had much snow. So to me, that's a complete waste of time. That's just how I see it, as in, if you're not going to have any snow to cover up the brown, nasty landscape, then it's a waste of time to me. So I do like snow and I do like winter, but I just wish that if we were going to have winter, it was going to be consistent and it was actually going to look like winter, which around here doesn't seem to happen very much anymore. Anyway, I digress about that, but I was just feeling a little bit bummed about it, and the last couple of days in this weather have just made me feel a little bit more bummed about it, I guess. So I just kind of wanted to see what you guys were feeling like, if you're ready for the winter season, if you're ready for a break, or if you're not. Also, with this wet grass today, there's probably a good chance that I'm gonna have to mow some wet grass, and I don't like doing that. But with one day here in the middle of rain that's coming for the next 5 days in a row again, probably means that I'm gonna have to do some mowing of some wet grass. Now, there's one benefit to real mowers, and I will explain that here. First thing though is I've been waiting to show you guys this, which is some of the bleaching that happened from the Tenacity that I was using. And I've been waiting for it to come out of it just to make sure that I could show you kind of in one video the beginning and the middle and the end of what that bleaching is gonna look like. So we're getting towards the end here. I'm about to cut with the reel mower again, and then we'll see. I think most of it is probably going to be grown out here and gone very soon. Also, the worms have been going crazy in here, creating a bunch of their mounds and creating a bunch of bumps in the lawn. That's a major bummer. And yeah, it's probably a possibility to get rid of those worms, but really they do a lot of good things in the soil, so I don't really want to do that. But over time, especially in the wetter parts of the year here in the beginning of spring and in fall, they can just really go crazy and create a lot of those little mounds in your yard. When you're mowing low, you're going to notice it. When you're mowing high, you really don't notice it. But I'm just going to have to kind of live with that here until hopefully it dries out a little bit and it's not quite as extreme. So here's the Tenacity bleaching on the existing grass. I thought originally that it was the bluegrass too, but it looks like the ryegrass got some of it as well. And so what happens is it just gets that kind of white bleach look to it. First couple weeks especially, I'll show you some pictures. It did not look good at all. So it's pretty bad at the beginning there, and I'll show you some pictures here, the beginning and then the middle stage and then what we're at today. So what happens with that bleaching is that the grass will just basically have to grow out of it. So it has to get to that point where it's just going to keep growing and growing and you keep cutting it off, and then eventually it goes away. So we're almost there today. I think after this cut it should look much better, and the green color is certainly looking very nice. So I wouldn't really say it's ever a great idea to be mowing wet grass. However, real mowers are a little bit different, and so let me explain why. It's a little bit of a different process to mow wet grass with a real mower. Just remember that real mowers are cutting the grass as if we were kind of cutting it with a scissors. So as it comes into that little blade, so it's coming around with its blades, and as the grass comes to that knife, it's actually slicing it metal on metal right there. And it's more like a scissors would be cutting it. So think about that when you're in wet weather. It's a lot easier to still get a clean cut with that. And to be honest with you, pretty much golf courses cut their greens, fairways, tees, things like that. Pretty much on a daily basis, they're cutting them wet in the morning because a lot of dew happens on the ground, and sometimes they try to mitigate that a little bit and get some of the dew off there, but most of the time they are cutting kind of wet grass in the morning. That's kind of the reasoning why the real mower works a little bit better in this situation, and especially when you have a lot of rain, there's really not a whole lot you can do. So today I might have to mow a little bit of the yard with the rotary mower. And with that being wet, the problem is that as the blade's going around, obviously a rotary mower in general is kind of just going around and kind of tearing off the top of the grass, which is why it's important to have your blade sharp. But especially when it's wet, things get gummed up in there and it just doesn't work very well. So make sure your blades are sharp if you're going to be mowing in wet weather, and make sure you also clean out your deck very frequently, because as soon as that stuff in there gets really clogged up, then the suction from your mower isn't working very well. In general, the mower is just gonna not function like it should. So blade sharp and make sure your deck is clean. So this right here is kind of a good example of the bleaching and what's left. So you can see the white here up on top. So we've got about another 1/4 of an inch to go before the green kind of comes back, maybe a little bit more, but again, this is not on everything, it's just on some of it, so it's definitely improving. Well, the Swordman has not seen enough action lately at all because of all this rain going on, and of course I could cut on the other side there with this thing, but again, anything that's heavy and when the ground is really, really wet and you want to do any turns on there, even with all rollers on here, I just would rather be able to pick up that little reel mower, move it to where I want it to go, put it back down, and go. So that's the advantage of that thing being so light as well. But I have been wanting to try the Swordman again and get mowing with it, so let's try it today on one little section. So that's cut down to about 1 inch now, and I'm going to use the grass catcher to try to get most of this so I don't have to try to clean it up afterwards. That's taken off quite a bit there in one go. Actually looks pretty good, so I'm just going to empty the catcher there and kind of finish this area here. On the far edge, I'm planning on going back to my other reel mower just because that's where I put in some of that soft dirt. With all this rain, it's really soft over there, so I'm not going to take this machine over that. But yeah, the rest of it actually looks fairly good. And again, I just really like the cut of that Swordman, so I'm looking forward to it on the other side. Alright, well, the side effect of this rain and, well, this weather in general is that I'm also not getting too much growth on my front yard. It's kind of just halted. Over the weekend we had temperatures that were right around the mid-40s for 2 to 3 days basically straight, and that really put the brakes on things here quite a bit. So I do want to show you that it has filled in some. It's not really doing a whole lot now. There's no sun. So not only is the temperatures though, but then also the lack of sunlight is not helping us at all, especially here on the north side of my house where typically it's going to be a lot more shaded anyway. Now that we're into October, the days are shortening quite a bit. There's not a whole lot of sun happening anyway, then the north side of the house has just really not been growing very much. So that also happens to be where we have that slope, and I've overseeded this a couple times, but every time I still am getting a little bit of washout, so there is some seed that has grown in there. I think it will get better here if we'd actually get a little bit of warmer temperature and a little bit of sunlight, so I think that will fill in a little bit better. But it may be something next spring that I just have to overseed again just a little bit too. So overall, I will say I'm not too unhappy about how it looks so far, but I did start very late in the year, so we're just gonna have to see if we can get a few days here with some sunlight, get things really rolling again. And I also need to get some fertilizer on it once I can actually walk out on there. Still just far too wet to walk on, so I just want to kind of do a little bit of test area there to see what it's going to look like. This thing will work perfectly on there once it's dried out and I can actually walk on it a little bit more. So one thing I guess you could say about all this rain is that the backyard does look pretty good now. I'm still amazed at what it looked like a couple months ago to what it looks like now, but there's still some improvement to go. Next week I'm going to be having to do some more fertilizer on it, and hopefully we'll jumpstart things, thicken it up just a little bit more than it is. It kind of thinned out a little bit from the dethatching, from the drought that we had kind of in July. So those things will get better over time, and I know that next spring, as soon as we get into a really flush of growth, as long as I'm taking care of it too like I should, and I take care of it this fall like I should, things will be fine. A few of you asked me how to adjust this reel mower, and so today I want to check and make sure that it's cutting paper properly and kind of show you that process too if you need to make any adjustments. It's pretty simple. So let me get the camera positioned here so you can actually see what we're doing. Now what I like about this thing is that it's so light and able to easily be moved around that I can actually flip it over here and I can kind of see as I move the blades like where the bed knife is touching, if it's not touching, and I can make adjustments that way even without really looking at the paper, just knowing that I need to just very lightly be touching. But of course we're going to test with the paper, but just wanted to show you that it's very easy to move it around and it's very simple to kind of test and look at the bed knife from this angle as well. It's really hard for me to get a perfect angle to show you this, but essentially I'm just going to put this paper right into where the grass would be touching the bed knife as it comes in. We're just going to spin the blade and we're going to see if it cuts. Now it looks like that blade cuts, that one cuts. So there's a couple of them that are not cutting very well. So what happens a lot is that some of these will get a little bit more worn down depending on how much they're touching the bed knife, and things need to kind of even themselves out over time, but we need to just slightly tighten that so that the rest of these blades are touching just a little bit more. So all we really need to do to adjust this, probably the easiest way is you can either tip it up like that, adjust it this way, or you can flip it over, but I find that this will be perfectly fine. You can see right here that thing, all we need to do is just tighten these very slightly. And by slightly I mean very slightly. I'll show you here in a second how touchy it is. I'm going to start with this side over here just because I measured over here and we're going across. It wasn't cutting perfectly across, but again, we do not need much of an adjustment here, so all I'm going to do is just go, I don't know if you can tell how much that was, but it seriously was not moving much at all. And the reason for that is that Again, when you're having metal touch on metal here, just the slightest adjustment is going to be enough to tighten things. So what this does is, all it does is that when we tighten this, the spring, it's pushing that bed knife up towards the blade. So these things do not move whatsoever. It's just this bed knife, and so when we move that, we want to make sure that we're not getting it too tight because we're hitting metal on metal here, and again, over time, it's going to dull out no matter what, but over time, we don't want to do any damage by having it too tight. All right, so now I'm going to take this paper again and get it in here. And we can see that it is cutting it off now. So that's exactly what we wanted. Let's check the other side. And we're good to go on that side as well. So again, just make sure that when you're doing this, you might think that, oh, I need to tighten it quite a bit, but you really don't. Just ever so slightly will make a big difference on these reel mowers. So that's probably why they're not as popular nowadays. Compared to a rotary mower where you essentially just sharpen the blades every once in a while. Other than that, maintenance is fairly minimal with these. I wouldn't say that it's difficult to do this, but you do need to check these things more often. And you'll kind of know when it's not cutting grass very well too. You'll be able to tell, but I check these probably every couple mows just to make sure that we're getting the best cut that we can possibly get. And that way I stay ahead of things, and the tiniest of adjustments are really not hard to make either. So I lowered my cutting height on the rotary mower a couple days ago down to about 2.5. I always do this for the fall and winter season here, really because I'd like to be mowing my grass a little bit shorter anyway, because it was kind of designed to be a little bit shorter, this bluegrass that I have. But of course, with the cooler temperatures and the weather that we have in the fall, I can actually accomplish that without there being too much heat to dry things out really quickly and all that. So it works okay for me in the fall. And so I've moved it down to 2.5. I believe this reel mower can go, the highest that it can go is 2.25. So for the heck of it here, I went through a few passes, and I'll show you a couple more here just to kind of show you how it cuts. It's definitely not as easy to push on thicker grass, that's for sure, and when you're not mowing very short like I am on the other area, it does work though, so let me show you that. So that's much more of a workout, probably not something that I would personally like to do on my whole backyard every week, that's for sure. So with thicker grass, it's going to be much more difficult. And today we also have the fact that it's a little bit wet too, which isn't helping us either. So rotary mower, better for a bigger area like this, better for a little bit taller cut. Well, remember when it wasn't supposed to rain today? Guess what? I guess that's it for today, my friends. So thank you so much for watching. More to come here, I'm sure, yet before the fall ends. Crossing my fingers here. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.